does it feel to be silenced? Especially when you have something to say. Being silenced repeatedly changes your perspective. It can make you feel small and insignificant. This has been the experience of many Black women due to a generational conditioning of silence. Law professor Patricia Broussard talks about the silencing of Black women in the University of Iowa's Journal on Gender, Race, and Justice. Now, when I was 5 years old, I made a comment to an adult about their appearance, and it wasn't very nice. My mother checked me, which means she corrected me, with, "Be quiet. Close your mouth. You don't have anything to say." And I did just that. I was quiet unless directly asked for my opinion. And then when I spoke, I was told, "Your voice is too soft. It's too whiny. It's too flat." Repeatedly silenced throughout my childhood, I felt small and invisible. A tradition of silencing that had been passed down through generations was unconsciously being practiced. Let me explain. We, as Black women, have been silenced through the generational traumas inflicted upon our ancestors through violence, daily beatings, the unwanted sexual advances of men, families torn apart, lynchings, murders. During slavery, the intersectionality of being Black and being a Black woman was not safe. Even now, it's not always safe. Back then, speaking out, casting a glance or look, learning to read or write could have gotten you beaten or killed. There was no way Black women could speak out or speak up without fear of the consequences. I want you to go with me to South Georgia. It's May 19th, 1918. Mary Turner, a Black woman, was lynched. Mary was hung by her ankles, covered in gasoline and oil, and burned. Her body was cut open, and then just to make sure she was dead, they shot her full of bullets. Now, why was she lynched, you ask? Well, Mary publicly spoke out against the lynching of her husband just the day before, falsely accused of murder. She threatened to take legal action. Mary, at the time that she was lynched, was 8 months pregnant. So not only did this terror lynching silence Mary, but it sent a loud and clear message to the community, especially to the Black women. Don't speak out, not even to protect your family. It's important to realize that racism mixed with misogyny and misogynoir does everything it can to intimidate the Black woman into silence. Enter the sapphire stereotype. This came about during the Jim Crow era, and it painted the picture that Black women were loud and angry and mean and emasculating. And this image was portrayed in print, on the radio shows, and later on the screen. Control, silence. And the sapphire stereotype is still present today. Just go on the internet, look at the memes and the images that you see. We are told that we speak when we shouldn't. We are told that this isn't the place to talk about the generational trauma of Black women. The question is, when is the time to talk about it? When is the place to talk about it? So what can we do? How can we begin to bring about change for the injustices Black women have faced and are still facing? I want to share 3 ways with you. We must first acknowledge the problem, work to break the conditioning of silence, and begin to champion for the voices of Black women. Firstly, we must acknowledge that there is a generational conditioning of silence. There's so many people who still do not know that this problem exists. If we don't acknowledge it and talk about it, this practice will continue. And then we risk that our communities remain unaware of its deep roots and the impact it has on future generations. We can start support groups. We can have conversations between the females and families. Or there can be lessons taught in the classroom. There's so much that we can do to acknowledge this problem. Secondly, we can work to break the conditioning of silence for Black women and for women of color. We can start conversations with younger girls to give them a space where they can feel safe, ask questions, and have their voices heard. There are several cities in the U.S. that have organizations that do just that. The Young Women of Toledo group has a radio program. The girls create the content. They're active members in their communities. This allows them to grow into the vibrant jewels that they were meant to be. I was fortunate enough to have an older female cousin whose passion was to train younger children. And this included holding officer positions in youth organizations, learning parliamentary procedure, and speaking in public. This encouraged me to use my voice. Thirdly, we can champion for the voices of Black women. It doesn't matter what your gender or skin color is. We can all make a difference. We can champion for their voices in the community and the workplace, because it's often in the workplace where there is that hesitation to speak up and share ideas. Data from leanin.org and McKinsey & Company reveal that 40% of Black and Latina women reported being interrupted or spoken over in a work setting. A Black lady that I know shared with me that she decided to time how long it took before she was interrupted by a colleague while she was speaking. 28 seconds. Can you imagine how small and invisible she felt in that moment? That was not a welcoming space for her voice. I clearly remember the time when I did not champion for a woman of color. We were in a C-suite meeting, and the male in charge verbally berated this colleague. Neither I nor the other woman in the meeting spoke up to stop the verbal assault. I was angered that this male felt his behavior was acceptable. I was angry and disappointed in myself for not speaking up for her. On that day, in that moment, we all lost. But I knew I could not let that happen again. And then I realized that my experience was not unique. In many conversations with Black women and women of color, I heard a common thread. They all carried stories of being conditioned to silence, told not to speak up, not to make themselves noticed, not to show up too loud or too angry. This conditioning of silence is present today still from external sources and within some families, with an unawareness of its impact on our young girls or the weight our older women carry as they maneuver in silence. The question is no longer, how dare I speak? The question should be, how dare you interrupt me? How dare you try to silence me? Because no one can tell us this is not the place to talk about the generational trauma inflicted upon us. No one can tell us how to show or manage our emotions. Silencing repeatedly leaves you feeling small, insignificant, and invisible as a byproduct. This needs to end now. When you are in settings with Black women and women of color, pay attention to opportunities to allow them to be heard. Make sure they are fully participating in discussions and they are not interrupted while speaking. So where can you do this? In the home, if you are a parent or family member, because this is where the foundation for learning and growth starts. In the classroom as a teacher or fellow student, on social media, in the community and workplace, regardless of your job title or function. So, Black women, women of color, let me ask you, where will you be impactful? To those perpetuating the silencing? How will you choose to bring about change and impact? Pick one area. Pick them all. You can all acknowledge this problem, break the conditioning of silencing, and champion for the voices of Black women. It's time to end the legacy of silence. We can work together to create a legacy where Black women's voices are welcomed, Black women's voices are heard, and Black women's voices are celebrated. I want you to join me as we turn the pages of history, start a new chapter, a new legacy. We all have a voice. Let's use it. Thank you.